Greetings, Wilkinson here. This is my second collection of musings. I've combined 4 of my short prior episodes into one episode for convenience. This is part of my story. I hope you enjoy it. Today I'd like to talk about the law of attraction. I first heard about the law of attraction when somebody suggested that I watch the video The Secret many years ago. So I was living in Edmonds, Washington at the time, and I was home alone, and I was watching the video. There's a point in the video where an entrepreneur has moved his family around, for years, bouncing them around, and finally he hit it big in whatever he was doing, and he moved into this oceanfront house, probably built, it looked like maybe in the 70s or 80s. He remodeled it and moved his family into it. He's sitting in his den, and his son, who's probably about 5, comes in and sits down on one of the moving boxes, and he starts chatting with him. And the kid starts kicking the box, and at one point he says, "Daddy, what's in the box?" And he goes, "Oh, those are my vision boards." "What's a vision board?" the kid asks. Well, the father says, "Hop off, I'll show you." So he cuts open the box. He pulls out one of the vision boards, which he had made years ago. Now, if you don't know what a vision board is, it's you sit down with a big poster board or something like that with magazines, paste, scissors, and you create the life that you want in pictures and words cut out of magazines and however you want to do it, and you put it on this poster and you look at it. That's your vision board. That's what you want your life to look like. So the guy pulls out the vision board, puts it on the wall, and he looks at it. On the vision board, which he had created years ago, is the house that he's now in. Now, it wasn't a house like it. It was the house. So he must have been looking at Architectural Digest or one of those magazines and liked that house and put it on there. And there he was. He was in the house. When I saw that, it went like poof. And I flashed back 10 years before. I was the men's minister in a church. One of my guys, his car broke down or something, and he needed a ride home to Edmonds, where I lived. And so I agreed. So I drove him home. We chatted. Pulled up to the place. He was renting an apartment, I think, from his uncle or great uncle or someone. And he says his thank yous and hops out of the car. And I just sit there for a minute and I watch him walk up to the building and across to the left. There's 3 apartments in the building. So he walked across, unlocked the door, and walked in. And I remembered as he walked in, I said, "I'm going to buy that building someday." Well, I'm looking at this. I'm having this flashback. And I'm in the apartment that I'm in the waterfront triplex that I had purchased. And I turned to my left, and there's the door that Forrest had walked through 10 years before. Now, when I bought the building, I realized and I remembered that he had lived there, but I didn't remember what I had said. And so that was my first exposure to the law of attraction, putting out in the universe what you want, and the universe happily sends it back to you. Now, over the years, I've learned the law of attraction can work both ways. So you can also get something that you don't want if you put it out there. So you got to watch what you want. In this other particular instance, I had broken up with my second partner, Michael, and I was kind of in a I hate men mode, to be honest. So I'm sitting there kind of feeling grumpy, and I thought the perfect guy for me would be Jeff Coe. It's too bad he's not gay. Now, Jeff Coe was a very good friend of mine. He was the youth pastor of the church I went to when I was married, and my youngest son was in his group. Jeff and I got along great. When I came out in 1999, Jeff was maybe one of 2 people that stopped talking to me when I came out. Jeff had moved to the LA area, and he was working at an ex-gay ministry, which if you don't know what that is, it's a church-based thing, religious-based thing, where they fix you so you're not attracted to men and you're not gay. Well, it doesn't work. But anyway, Jeff moved there. He was in that job, and I hadn't spoken to him in 8 years. So I put this out in the universe that he would be the perfect guy for me. Well, after an 8-year silence, about a month later, I get an email from Jeff. And he says, "I'm coming to Seattle to move my parents into a nursing home or assisted living, and I want to talk to you," which I said, fine. And I thought, well, one of 3 things. 1, he's going to preach to me about being gay. 2, he's going to apologize for being such a shit, because he was really nasty to me. We were good friends, and he just stopped. He cut me off. And 3, maybe he came out himself. Well, he came up, we had a chat, and he had left that job and the ministry thing he was in down there, and he had indeed come out as gay. We went back and forth between LA and Seattle for about 6 months, reacquainting ourselves and getting to know each other. And we decided that he would move up and move in with me 6 months later. Well, the relationship lasted about 6 years, but we weren't really an energetic match the way I look at it today. He's a good guy, and I do love him, but we just were not a match. So that was my other side of, the exposure to the law of attraction. Starting in maybe 2010, somewhere around there, I was still with Jeff, and we came down to Palm Springs, and I rented my friend Kirk's house for maybe a month at a time. And I did this for maybe 6 or 7 years. I'd go down for 3 or 4 weeks every year and rent his place. And I fell in love with Palm Springs. And there was a house next door to him, which was a rental. They had dogs, they had junk cars. The landscaping wasn't taken care of. There's junk up on the roof. I mean, it was just the absolute disaster. But because I was in real estate and had remodeled so many houses over the years, I realized the bones of that house are really great, and this is a great neighborhood. So for about 6 or 7 years, when I would pull out of that driveway, I would say, I'm going to buy that house. I'm going to buy that house. I'm going to buy that house. And guess what house I'm sitting in as I'm speaking to you? I'm in that house. It came on the market when I was in Seattle. I was ready to buy finally, and I bought it. That was another thing on the law of attraction. I did my vision board, and it's really odd. It's too bad you can't see it. This isn't a visual presentation here, but on my vision board in rainy Seattle, maybe 15 years ago, there's some images I cut out. And if you were standing in my backyard looking out at the mountains and the palm trees, and you looked at the picture I cut out of a magazine, it was kind of an illustration type thing. It almost matches what I'm looking at in my backyard. I mean, the mountains and the palm trees, everything is there. In that same image, there's 2 men standing there shaking hands. Now, my original goal was to have a B&B. Well, I don't have a B&B down here, but I have Airbnb. And I have guys coming and going all the time, and it's just a fantastic experience. I meet lots of wonderful people. Some of them become really good friends, and that's what I'm doing here now. So the vision board really works. Another thing on that vision board, just to give you an idea of how these things work, is when I think I broke up with Jeff. I might have weighed I think it was 204 pounds. And when I was quote unquote back on market in the dating scene, I decided, I need to start exercising and diet, watch what I eat. And I got down to 172 pounds. I was still up in Edmonds, Washington at the time. And I got down to 172, and I could not get any lower than that. I said to my friend Christine one day, 172 must be my ideal weight, because no matter what I do, I get down to 172, and that's it. I mean, it must be a plateau. It must be my perfect weight. I can, stop eating and exercise like crazy. I might go down to 171, but the next day I'll be up at 172. Then one day I was talking to somebody about vision boards and law of attraction and things like that. And I pulled out my old vision board. It was rolled up. And to my astonishment, I'm looking at it. And when I weighed 204, I went into the bathroom with my cell phone in my black slippers. I got on the scale. I pushed down on the sink till I got to the weight I wanted to be someday. And I took a picture of it, and I cut that out, printed it, cut it out, and put it on my vision board. And guess what weight it was? I didn't even remember this. It was 172 pounds. Another thing that happened to me along this line was in the video, The Secret, the guy, I don't remember his name, but the guy that wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, he had read where, you can maybe write a check to yourself, and that's your vision board of sense. You can make a check and put it on the wall, or you put it in your wallet. Jim Carrey did that with his first movie. He wanted to be the first guy to make $20 million. So he wrote himself a $20 million check and put it in his wallet. And he was indeed the first guy to be paid $20 million. Well, anyway, the Chicken Soup for the Soul guy said to his wife, they were broke. And he wrote all these stories. Well, I wonder if this will work for us, maybe for $100,000. Let's do it. So they wrote a check themselves and put on their wall or whatever. And then through a series of events, they met this lady that wrote stories for the National Enquirer. She talked to him, and he told a story. And in that, he said, at the end of it, it was like, send me $5 and I'll send you some of these stories. Well, he got like 98,000 something dollars. So it worked. And then he said to his wife, I wonder if it'll work for $1 million. And so they wrote themselves $1 million check. And the publisher for that book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, when they signed him up, they gave him a check for $1 million, be the publisher for that book. So all this stuff works. So I thought, hey, I'll try it. So I wrote myself a $100,000 check and put that on my vision board. It took about 5 or 6 years, but I ended up, and it's the largest real estate commission I ever got for a single sale, but I got a check for $102,000 and some change. So this stuff really works. And, I'll talk about this more in other podcasts. But anyway, that's something that's a real part of my life, and I believe in it. Mark, my energy guy, always says to me, where focus goes, energy flows. And it's really true. I mean, what we focus on is what's going to come into our lives. So just keep that in mind today as you go through your day. Have a great one. Today we're going to talk about my energy work. I've mentioned this a couple other times in other podcasts, but I've never really explained anything. With my ministry and Christian background, anything having to do with energy and Reiki or any of that was all, my perspective was, that's all demon stuff. That's the devil stuff. You don't want to get involved with that. Well, this part of my journey began when I moved down here. My friend Mel up in Seattle had helped me sell my house up there, and she got a hold of me, called me one day, and she said, I want to gift you an hour on the phone with my energy lady. I said, well, I'll think about that. So I thought about it, and I did a little bit of research, and my conclusion was, well, why not? Let's see what it's all about. So I did the call with her, and it was interesting, but we weren't exactly a match. I mean, she was talking about the various chakras and stuff like that. And from the little bit of research that I had done, she was numbering them backwards. And, I didn't really understand what she was doing, but it did pique my interest. Meanwhile, I'd been going to Mark Hollenstein, who was a massage therapist. And one day I mentioned to him, I'm kind of interested in this energy stuff. I think I want to explore it a bit. He said, well, haven't you looked at my website? And I said, oh, I guess not. He said, well, that's what I mainly do. That's my main gig. So I looked into it, and then I started doing energy work with him. It's been a really interesting journey over the last 5 years with him. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff has happened, and it's just pretty amazing. I've expanded and grown, and I've opened up my mind and heart to a lot of other possibilities. I felt really closed in and shut off back in my old belief system. That's been changing a lot the last 5 years. There was an instance, maybe 2 months ago. Here's the situation. So I'm on his massage table, and he's moving the energy around. We talk a little bit first, then I get on the table, and then he moves the energy around, and we're having a discussion, and we see what we see, and we, see what happened. Well, this one day, I'd been going to him for nearly 5 years at this point, and I said to him, I have false beliefs. I don't know what they are, but I know I have false beliefs, and I'm ready to give them up. Okay, that was the first thing that happened on that session. Then a little bit later, he said to me, there's a woman sitting in the corner over here. Now, obviously it wasn't a physical woman, but he was seeing something. And I said, what does she look like? And Mark described my mother down to the dresses that she used to wear. I mean, it was uncanny. And there she was sitting there. And I don't know what that was all about. So the session ends, and I'm on my way home. And I thought to myself, there's a photo of my mother holding me when I was a baby, and I want to find that photo and show it to Mark and ask him, is this the person that you saw? And so, just as clear as I'm speaking right now, a little voice inside me said, look in your safe. Now, I have a safe at home. I don't have $1 million in it, but, I throw red car registrations and things I want to keep. I just throw stuff in there. So I go home and I open the safe, and I don't find the picture that I was looking for. However, right on the top, near the top of the stack of stuff in there, was a card, and the card was from my parents. Now, my belief, and I would say right now my false belief, was that my parents never loved me or cared for me. So I opened this card from my parents to me, and it tells me how much they love me and how much they appreciate me, blah, blah, blah. Whoa. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the card materialized and all of a sudden it was in there. It was in there all the time, but I wasn't ready to see it and receive the message that was in that card. Well, that was the first thing that happened. Then the second thing that happened was, well, maybe the photo is out in my memory box in the garage. Now, I nicknamed this box, it's kind of one of those gray crates that you put Christmas ornaments in, and the two flaps are on the top. I throw stuff in there that I want to keep. So I call it the memory box. There's letters and things. Probably I'll never read them, but I don't want to throw them away. So I throw stuff in there. So I thought, well, maybe the photo's in there. So I go out. I don't find the photo, but I find a letter, a 3-page letter from my ex, Jeff, written to me 1 month after we split up when we were in the Seattle area. Now, my belief with Jeff was that he never apologized for what happened when we broke up, and he never thanked me for all the stuff I did for him over 6 years when we were together. Well, I start reading the 3-page letter, and first of all, he apologizes, and then he, over 3 pages, tells me the things that he's thankful for. So both of those were false beliefs that I had, and I was ready to give them up. Mark is a pretty interesting guy. Just to give you a little bit of other background here, around I'd say early 2019, he said to me, the year 2020 is going to be total chaos. Obviously, it was chaos. We all know that now. And then around in the late fall of 2019, he said something's going to be happening on the world stage where people will start dying around us. Obviously, COVID. But he called it before it happened. Then in the spring, before it happened, he said the next thing that's happening is a tsunami of anger. George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, etc., etc. So for about, I don't know, probably a year and a half now, he's been saying something's going to happen where we're going to have a collective gasp. The world will have a collective gasp because something's going to be revealed to us. So we're waiting for that. Who knows if it's going to be something to do with Russia and Ukraine and everything else going on over there. But I don't know. These are really interesting times. The energy work I've been doing has really helped me be grounded. Mark talks about 3D and 5D. 3D would be basically the way the world has always run, based on fear, control, manipulating people. 5D is where we're moving. And Mark is not the only one talking about this. People, I've listened to tons of other podcasts and read books, and we're moving into 5D, which is basically a love-based way of being. And people are awakening. I mean, the politicians joke about it being awoke and all this stuff, but it's really happening. There's something going on where everyone in the world is just vibrating right now. It's like all of this craziness going on, but people are waking up. It's really going to be interesting to see how all this unfolds, but I'm super excited about it. If you want to check out some of this stuff, I suggest you start Googling and look it up online and see what's happening. Today I would like to talk about love. I grew up in a Christian home. We always went to church. I mean, every time the church was open, we'd be there. And I pretty well continued that tradition after I got married. The preachers and all of the people, the Christians, would talk about the 3 kinds of love in the Bible. There was brotherly love and erotic love, and then agape love or God love. I think love is a beautiful thing. I have to say my opinion and what love means to me has changed a lot over the years, particularly the last 20 years. I guess the changes began when I became separated, never mind the divorce 6 months later, and then by the way, I figured out I'm gay after that. When I got separated after literally decades of working in the church and trying my best to love people, when I needed some love, it wasn't there. I was abandoned, utterly abandoned. And that really affected me in a lot of different ways. I remember this big church. I was the men's minister in the church and was so involved in everything, on the board, healing ministry, the feeding ministry, everything, eyeballs deep in everything. When I got separated, literally I was abandoned. Now, foolish me, believing in the Bible at the time and, the concept of the body of Christ, I thought, okay, if one part of the body's hurting, then the others would, be there for them. That was my concept of it. And it was what I actually tried to live. But when I needed something, nobody was there. Literally in this large church, there was only one person that said anything of encouragement to me before I left. I wasn't formally kicked out. They don't do that. They just snub you and ignore you, and then you basically leave, which is what I did. But this one man, he was the only one, and he said to me, I don't understand, but I just want you to know that I care. And that was the one ray of light out of that Christian church in that whole experience with me. Once I discovered and figured out that I really was gay. Over the years, I tried different churches, and the gay churches didn't really do that much for me, because in the gay community, typically what happens when you're involved in the church, or you try to be, is that it'll go two ways. The first way is they want to be enlightened and basically PC, I think, a lot of the time. You can come, we welcome all of you, but sit in the pew and don't get involved and don't really say anything. That's on one side of the spectrum. Then on the other side is the gay churches that make everything about being gay, which that doesn't work for me either. I mean, they could preach a sermon on Jesus got in the boat and somehow that would be something to do with gay. Well, that doesn't work. So I've been on this journey now for over 20 years. I have not gone to church much. My idea of religion and God and the church has changed. A lot of what I've observed and experienced, it started back then when I was rejected, but Christians, especially in the political realm, I've watched this over the years, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. They talk about Christianity, and they've kind of grabbed that as their label, but they're far from Christ-like or loving. When you want to kick people off of food stamps, and people that really need it, there'll be cheaters. Of course there will. When you kick them off of food stamps and you want to control women's bodies and you want to control people's lives and you want to control who people love, all of that is wrong, and it's not loving. And I'm sorry to say, back in the day when I was, young and probably foolish, I was a Republican, and the Democrats were the evil one. But over the years, as I've looked at the whole thing, the Democrats seem to seemingly try to do some of the work that is mentioned in the Bible, taking care of the poor, health care. All of these things. I'm sure Jesus, if he were here in the flesh, would be mortified of what Christians have, taken his name and made it out to be today, because it's not Christian at all. It's not Christ-like, and it's certainly not loving. I've mentioned before that I've gotten into a lot of energy work, and it's really changed me. Mark Hollenstein, my energy guy guru, who I've been learning from for over 5 years. And he's not alone on this concept. A lot of energy people talk about this or hear it on podcasts and read about it. We're all 8 billion of us on the planet. We're all in the same ocean. We're all drops in the same ocean. I think finally realizing that all of them are in me and I'm in them, and we're all the same thing. We're all, whether you call it God or source or whatever, that's who we are and that's what we are. And we're experiencing our spiritual selves, however you want to define that. We're experiencing that in these bodies on this planet, all 8 billion of us. I still struggle with the concept of this as well, but it's really helped me a lot when first of all, I've had to learn to stop being so damn judgmental, because I was very judgmental, dogmatic. And even when I let go of a lot of the stuff that the church taught me over the years, I still had that ingrained in me a lot. That's not what God or source really wants in us, and it's not my best self. I have to look at somebody else, and that's the key. It's really realizing that you really are one. Now, all of the government stuff and all of the BS going on right now, the whole scheme here is divide and conquer, make people hate each other, choose sides. I basically stopped watching news. I won't watch any of this anymore. And they're all guilty of it, whether it's CNN on one side or Fox on the other. It's all the same stuff. And realistically, I don't know what to believe. I think everybody is pretty well corrupt, and that's pretty sad. But getting back to the point of love, I think it's accepting people where they are
And I'm trying my best to do that and not judging them. Of course, the biggie here would be somebody like Trump. It's like, wow, the guy is an asshole. But to ask myself, if I had Trump's life and everything happened to me the way it happened to him, would I be making the same decisions that he's made and that he's still making? And there's probably a pretty good chance that I would. And I have to recognize that. This whole thing of really looking at everybody as one, all beings as one, has really changed my perspective. And it's opened me up, I think, to real love. I had all these Airbnb people come here, and the universe always sends me the right guys here at the right time. I'm learning something every time. And they walk in. I can see a name on a request on Airbnb where they're coming in, and sometimes it'll be like, bam, they're really going to be cool. And you're going to actually fall in love with them, not romantic love, but they're going to be really cool human beings, and you're going to learn something, and you're going to love them. And to me, that's the kind of love that I want to pursue. I want to really be open and not be judging people. And that's what agape love is. If there is a God, and my definition of that is changing over the years, I'm not sure. I think God is way bigger than the church has made him out to be, or her out to be. But there's definitely a power out there, and I experienced it a lot over the years, and I still experience it. That's the kind of love that I want, is not having walls between me and other people, but trying to look into their head and their heart and saying, they're hurting, they're the ones, I could be them under any other circumstances. This is my life, they have their life. And I accept them, and I don't have to convince them to think the way I think. I don't have to try to persuade them that I'm right, you're wrong, you're on that side, I'm on this side. I don't want any part of that. And I'm trying my best to walk away from that whole way of thinking. I want real love. And real love is looking at somebody and seeing yourself in them. Try it today. When you're walking down the street, just give that person a genuine smile and try loving them out of your heart chakra, out of who you are, and just see what happens.
Today is April 29th, and this would have been my younger sister's birthday. She had these huge brown eyes, kind of a round face, and jet black hair, and palish skin. The thing I probably remember, besides that, the thing I remember most about her was how she used to sit on the floor. She'd sit with her knees in front of her, but then she had her legs turned and twisted, and they came back. And kind of like a frog. That's what it reminded me of. And to this day, I don't know how she didn't ruin her knees doing that. But in any case, when she was about 8 years old, she got very sick, and they took her to the hospital, where they discovered that she had juvenile diabetes. It was a very rough life for her. It changed everything. Later on, she got rheumatoid arthritis on top of the diabetes, and so that made it even worse. But growing up really restricted what she could do. She, at one point, became out of control as she got a little bit older, as a young adult. And she had to take like 12, sometimes up to 12 shots a day of insulin, because it was just so crazy, up and down, up and down. And I remember when she was younger and living with us, when we were all living together as a family, she would just have these seizures from, her sugar being too low and too much insulin or whatever. And my mother would run to the kitchen, grab some orange juice, dump some sugar in it, and then run back, and they would basically force feed her drinking it, and she would come back to us. That happened over and over again, and there was so many close calls. As she became a young adult, she went, I think, about a year to college, but everything going on was just too much for her, so she dropped out of college. And then she had a friend, Sally, and Sally and her lived together for years and years. I don't remember exactly how long, but it was over a decade. And Sally would take her everywhere, help her in and out of the car, do everything for her. And she was, I mean, she basically was a saint. I think some people may have thought they were lesbians because they seemed so close, but they weren't. One day, though, Sally had had enough and she just kind of snapped. And she told my sister she had to get out. I can understand it. I mean, it was really hard on my sister, but when you're taking care of someone that much and, you know, you're not partnered with them, they're just a good friend, and it basically takes over your life. So Sally didn't have a lot of other life because, I mean, she was a school teacher, but she, you know, that's what she did. She taught school and took care of my sister. So my sister went ahead and arranged and got an apartment for herself. She got a little bit of assistance from the state. They helped her out, and she moved into that. I remember she had a motorized wheelchair, and she lived just outside of Buffalo, New York. And of course, there's tons of potholes and really ugly, nasty roads there. But she was about a mile from my other sister's house, and she would drive the wheelchair down the road fearlessly, zipping around the potholes. And she would, you know, had a like a pole on the back of it with a flag up on the top, and they would just kind of wave back and forth so the drivers could see her. I'm still amazed that she didn't get hit by a vehicle, though. She loved music. She was very creative, and she invented games and songs and did all kinds of things like that. Eventually, the rheumatoid arthritis took over, and she was pretty well bedridden. She loved God, and she was very religious, spiritual. And I think that sustained her for a lot of the time. In early summer of 2000, our older sister, Joanne, passed away. She was overweight, under a lot of stress, and had a heart attack. I flew back for the funeral. My younger sister wasn't able to go to it because she was in the hospital at the time. Her stomach had stopped functioning. Her insulin was all messed up. But they eventually got her back on track, and she was ready to leave the hospital the next day after Joanne's funeral. So I went and got her, brought her home, set her up in the apartment, got food for her, filled her pantry, refrigerator, and we had some great chats. Toward the end of it, it was the Saturday night, she wanted me to stay a little bit longer. And, you know, I was in the middle of my real estate career. I had to get back, and, you know, we said our goodbyes and I went home. Following Monday, I had just listed a home for one of my clients. I was walking down the front stairs and my cell phone went off, and I answered it. It was my sister Joanne's daughter calling me, and she said to me, they got there and they tried to help her. They tried to bring her back, but she was gone. And so my younger sister died alone in her hospital bed, in her bedroom, in her apartment, slumped against the wall. That's where they found her. Now you can imagine what I felt. I mean, there was immense guilt. You know, I considered that the regret of my life that I didn't stay. It was probably about 15 years later. I was doing some energy work, and I saw, it was like a vision, and I saw my sister, and she was standing. I don't know where she's standing. She was dancing, singing, and had a huge smile on her face. And that did something inside. It basically healed something for me. Now, in the next probably 2 years, I lost my father. My brother rolled his Jeep, and his 16-year-old son died in that accident. My mother passed away, and a friend died. So there was just a lot of loss over, you know, those couple of years. But I think the message today is when you have a chance to reach out or to be present for somebody, you know, do it. I mean, if someone is brought to your mind, if you think about them and you think, oh, I should call them, make the call. Stop by or see somebody or bring them something or send a card. Nobody mails anymore, but do something like that. If we could all remember to do that, I think that it would really lessen a lot of our regrets in life. Just something to think about today. Have a good one, everybody.